Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining in to our scheduled meeting of the Quality Life and Public Safety Committee meeting for today, February 15th, 2022. My name is Majority Leader TJ Clark. I am the co-chair of the Quality Life and Public Safety Committee meeting. I have joined with me Councilman Josh Mitchum, who is a voting member, Councilman John Gale, who is a voting member, and we are broadcasting live streaming live from HPA-TV and also to Comcast Xfinity Channel 96 and on Frontier as well. And we are going to begin. Hopefully Councilman Sanchez, he doesn't sends his regards, and hopefully he will be able to join us later on. But with that said, we have a full packed agenda, and I'm glad to be joined by our colleagues in the city government. We have our Director of Emergency Services and Technology, Susan Webster, our Chief of Fire, Chief Rodney Barkle, and we have our representative from Corporation Counsel, Natalie Fiola Guerreri, and we have joining us our Chief of Police, Jason Thody, and members of our Police Department, Officer Laura Trzynski, Lieutenant Adam Boisford. And am I missing anybody else? We have our staff as well, Neoli Ortiz and Haley Green that is joining us from our council staff. I think I covered everybody. So with that said, we'll move with our first agenda item 2.1, Mayor Bronin, with a company resolution authorizing the city of Hartford to accept the grant award of $499,737 from OJP. And who are we going to have present on behalf of the police department?
I'll go ahead, and I have Lieutenant Boisford, who's the commander of major crimes, which is where this falls. This team falls, and Lieutenant Trzynski is the commander of planning and accreditation, which is where she basically wrote the grant along with our consultant. So this is a competitive grant that we looked into. We looked into some programmatic changes in the beginning of 2021 as to how we could essentially better address violence, particularly gun violence. Looked around the country at some programs that were evidence-based. Denver, Colorado had a non-fatal shooting team that we thought was very effective. Basically, it takes when you look at homicides, when someone passes away as a result of a shooting or any other means, there is a significant amount of resources that are kind of immediately dedicated to that. That is just how it's kind of always been, and they take priority because a life was lost. When you look at non-fatal shootings, many times the difference between a non-fatal shooting and a homicide can be a matter of how long it took to get to the emergency room. It could be a matter of where the person was hit on their body. It oftentimes is not a matter of intent. Certainly the intent was still there and the potential for death is still there. So the way that this program really worked is we're looking at these non-fatal shootings and dedicating the resources and the follow-up to the same level as a homicide. And along with our researcher, we looked into these different programs, and we thought that this non-fatal shooting team was a good way for us to introduce serious offenders into the court system and try to build better cases, have a higher solvability rate with non-fatal shootings to try to prevent those that are perpetrating these non-fatal shootings from becoming the next murderer, the next person that pulls the trigger that causes a death. We looked into the grant and we decided that we weren't going to wait to get the grant. We implemented this team with 4 detectives and a sergeant back in April and applied for the grant. If we got the grant, that's great. If we didn't get the grant, we believed in the program and we were going to do it anyway. But with only, I think, 9 awards countrywide, we were selected to receive this grant, and we're excited about it. So Basically, it provides us with $499,000. That money is broken up in a couple different ways. Essentially, just pull it up here. 370,000 of that is for salaries, overtime, basically the people, a research and evaluation piece, and procedural justice training. 87,000 of that is fringe costs. 30,000 is to cover travel, which is required by the grant to present basically our program at grant convening conferences over the next 3 years. It is a 3-year grant, and $12,000 for shooting response team training. In that 370, there is overtime. There is also money to pay the researcher to do an ongoing analysis of our shootings and our violence to make sure that we are addressing it. The root of the problem. I know for many years it was thought that our a lot of our violence was group related. It is really we have in this last year done a lot of in-depth analysis into that, and there's a lot of differing things that drive our violence. But above group and gang affiliation is narcotics involvement and personal disputes. So that is essentially the grant in a nutshell. It's I can't remember the last time that we were given a competitive award like this. It's a great opportunity for us to kind of show off how we can use a little ingenuity and thinking outside of the box to do things a little bit differently. I do have Lieutenant Boisvert on the line here. We can go over just some of the statistical changes that we have seen even so far year to date, but our clearance rate for non-fatal shootings just from April until the end of December of last year went up 162%. I think that number has actually increased since we looked at this the last time. But I'm happy to answer any questions. We also saw a decrease in non-fatal shootings from 2000 to 2021. We went from 211 non-fatal shootings down to 163 last year, when many of our surrounding communities and other cities have seen an increase. We saw a decrease, and I attribute that to the work of this non-fatal shooting team.
Councilman Mitchum, you have a question already?
I do. I don't know if the presentation was done. The chief paused, so I didn't know if that was a moment to jump in.
It's not done yet. Lieutenant Boisvert is going to take over.
I beg your pardon, and I'll hold my question.
The chief was just providing a detailed explanation for an introduction. Lieutenant Boisvert, you can continue.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, as the chief said, so 2020, we had a total of 211 non-fatal shootings. That was before the inception of the shooting response team. At that point, 21 arrests were made for the people involved in that. In 2021, we had a total of 163 non-fatal shootings. That's quite a drop from 2020. Out of those, 55 arrests were made, and there's still, obviously those cases are still open. So we expect more than that. This year so far, we're up to 16 non-fatal shootings. And out of that number, 3 we believe are self-inflicted at this point. We've also have one person under arrest for a shooting and 2 warrants that are being drafted now. So off to a good start. We're up to a 6-man team for the non-fatal shootings. These guys are very good at what they do, and they're doing a good job.
Thank you, Lieutenant Trzynski. Do you have anything to add, since you helped us receive this grant by your great writing skills?
No, nothing to add at this point. Just the guys on the shooting response team were already doing a great job, and we were able to just put their work into writing, and DOJ liked what they saw. So good job all around.
Thank you for that. All right, I'll open the floor to my council colleagues, and I will call upon Councilman Mitchum.
Thank you, sir. So a couple questions. I think the chief said there was 4 detectives and 1 sergeant before the grant. Now, and the bulk of the grant pays for salary and overtime. Is this something where you're going to simply you're moving people from other units, or with this money is the idea to hire someone else, or like how does that play out in terms of the salary and overtime spending?
So we kicked it off with 4 and a sergeant because honestly, that's what I had to spare to refocus. We had to refocus other detectives from other things. We anticipate that the workload on the homicide side was going to go down a little bit, so we were able to spare some there. But this required us to really dedicate 4 detectives to non-fatal shootings. Remember, we still had detectives that were assigned to non-fatal shootings before. They would just kind of rotate through. So you might be on a rotation where you're working on burglaries. That's kind of your primary function. But when the callback rotation comes to you, you might catch a shooting. What this really does is just kind of harnesses the expertise. That's why there's money for training in there, so that these folks can be as well versed and well trained as our homicide detectives are in homicide. They can get the same level of dedication to non-fatal shooting. So we won't be able to hire, any additional. This funding is kind of spread out over what we had. Right before we got the grant, we added 2 detectives. We made some detective promotions, and we added 2 detectives to make it a 2 and 6. A 1 and 6, 1 sergeant and 6 detectives. Denver has a lot of similarities to us in numbers and in size. I believe that they run a 1 and 8. I'd like to get there someday, but the detectives are doing a tremendous job. We've only had the 1 and 6 now for just about 2 months. So I'm looking forward to see what kind of an impact that they can make on this full year. We only had a partial year last year, but we won't be hiring anybody new. This actually dedicates some money for Lieutenant Boisvert to manage, for the sergeant to manage, for the overtime. So it will impact our overtime budget in major crimes. Some of these callbacks for the shootings can be covered under this grant. So it will mitigate some of our costs that exist currently. But it really is about refining and focusing on these non-fatal shootings and bringing that level of investigation up to the more serious homicide level of investigation.
Another question, Frank. I'll try to get all my questions, then I'll be quiet. How much? And forgive me, this is a stupid question. I don't know from all this, but how much of this is this money and this effort is devoted to illegal guns, or like the flow of guns into the city, or is that a separate question from the people doing the shooting? Like how do those go together or not?
So this particular grant doesn't really focus on the guns. The ATF, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, works with our intelligence division on kind of gun tracing. What this does do is, as we find the individuals that are responsible for shootings, whether they're shots fired where no one's hit, whether they're a shooting where someone is hit and it's non-fatal, or whether it's a shooting that results in a fatality in a homicide, those individuals are debriefed to find out where the gun came from. We do tracing on all those firearms, again, through the forensic lab and through the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. We have been fortunate working with the forensic lab, the state forensic lab. They gave us our own NIBIN machine, which is the National Ballistics Index, where we have an actual truck up here that houses that NIBIN system, where we can link these firearms to shootings. We can link a shooting to a shooting, a gun to a shooting. We can link these casings between one another. So kind of the short answer to that question is that, the tracing of these firearms and the sources of these firearms and recovering these firearms is kind of melded into solving the case. You kind of got to solve the case first. And then once you get that person in front of you, you can start to talk about where the guns came from. Majority of the guns that we seize are from our crime reduction team and from search warrants from Vice Intelligence and Narcotics. They're not from the investigative efforts of this shooting team. This is about really finding the people that pull the trigger, and our success rate in that, when it didn't result in a death, was low. And that's true of the whole nation. Our success rate, even right now, is really above the national average when it comes to non-fatal shooting solving. But this is more of an investigative tool. This grant kind of really dives into preventing recidivism in victims that don't get justice. You know, if the victims feel as though we're not solving these cases, they tend to retaliate themselves. So that's a big key. The training about really a victims focused investigation is what we've kind of focused this training money on, where it's kind of a more of a procedural justice style training where the detectives are going to learn about, you know, the impacts of their investigation, not just this kind of assembly line, but where bringing somebody to justice can kind of break the cycle of violence. So there's a lot of interesting little pieces of it. I would encourage you, I can send you the link to look at the grant narrative and to look at what we proposed. It's too much to go over, and quite frankly, I haven't memorized the whole thing, but there's a lot of cool things in there that you might be interested to read.
Okay. My last question is the researcher, not who like their name, but like, who is this? Someone who's on staff, or is this someone that you've connected with locally? And like, what are their qualifications? What does that research part look like?
Yeah, so the research piece is Lisa Barrow. She lives in the city, but she is a professor up in Massachusetts. Laura, you're going to help me with her college. Is it
Westfield State?
Westfield State. You know, really a great resource to have that lives here and has invested in the city. And she kind of reached out a while back and said, hey, listen, this is kind of what I do for a living. She's quoted in violent crime research on the West Coast. She works with Oakland. She works with a lot of places on this very thing, on mostly shooting violence, but violence crime as a whole. And so she was really able to help us with a lot of the research stuff. She also will be doing a town hall coming up February 26th. She did basically went back and did a 4-year study of our violence, and we'll be presenting that publicly with the mayor and her on the 26th. We're going to record it. If you can't see it live, I would encourage you to take a look at it in the recorded version. She found some extremely interesting information about age of offender, age of victim that was really not the narrative that we thought it was. Again, the source of the violence, everybody was like group affiliation, gang affiliation. That's not the case here. It is in some other places, but it's driven by other, not to say that that's not a part of it, but it's driven by some other things. Drug markets here found that a lot of this violence is very personal disputes. The ages frankly aren't as young as we thought they were. Some really good information. So she really drove that information home. And this is why we kind of thought, because most of our violence is gun violence, we thought that this was a good approach, especially in a time, to be honest with you, where, pre-COVID, the police officers and the detectives might have had confidential informants and other sources where we knew who a shooter was, and we knew that they were aggravated, and we knew there was a chance for retaliation. And we were actually able to go out there many times and arrest them for a narcotics offense, which would put them away for a small period of time, cooling off period, if you will, a period of time for us to gather enough information to do an arrest warrant. On the bigger crime, could have been a homicide, might have been a non-fatal shooting. With COVID, it was very difficult to get people kind of out of the mix, to get them out of the loop for a period of time to cool off, or so that we could do our investigation and get them out of the violent circle. Couldn't really do that with COVID because people were going into court and they were coming right back out. This was an opportunity for us to focus on getting a significant charge on them for the actual offense that they committed, the pulling of the trigger. And the hopes here is that will impact our homicide numbers in a positive way as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from my colleagues? Chief, I have a question. The grant person or consultant, researcher that helped us, did they help us with the drafting the climate study? Is this the same person?
Yes. Lisa
Okay.
Barrow is the researcher for the climate study too. That's how we kind of got introduced to her.
Gotcha.
The climate study was over. She does a lot of work. She did work with Boston PD on their climate analysis as well. That's kind of how she was introduced to us. And when that was completed, she lives here, so she has a significant investment in the quality of life in the city and the crime in the city. And she said, look, if I can be of any assistance in the area of violent crime as well, I'm glad to help. And that was kind of how that relationship was continued on into this world as well. I think, when it comes to like, nationally, when you see, like, she's quoted in a lot of pretty big articles and stuff, I really think that, this is her cup of tea. This is what she really is passionate about, focuses on. She does a lot of other law enforcement related and policing related studies, as we know. But she partnered in the climate study with another professor from, I believe, URI, to do the climate study.
Okay. Thank you. Does this grant have any ties to help out with C4 with the non-fatal shooting?
Not so much with C4. There is there is money in there for analysis for a crime analyst, and in C4 that's who kind of mans those cameras, if you will. We are probably looking to embed. We're going to take a portion of one of those analysts from C4, and they're going to work directly out of major crimes for a day or two a week to help with the kind of behind the scene, not the kind of analytics that you're thinking of, like Comstat data and mapping and things like that. That's the stuff that our researcher is kind of tasked with doing out of this grant, but more, mining video, analyzing ShotSpotter data, things like that to help, basically evidence-based analytics to help with the solving of the crimes in the non-fatal shootings. I also added to the crime scene division because now we're asking for better investigations, more timely investigations, more thorough investigations into non-fatal shootings. There is a forensic component to that and an evidence collection component of that. So I did add a detective to the crime scene division that to bolster their abilities as well.
Thank you. Any questions? Hearing none. All right, the chair will entertain a motion.
Move to send this back with a favorable recommendation.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, because I was getting ready to ask Corporation Counsel for an opinion, but doing that, it's been moved by Councilman Gill, seconded by Councilman Mitchell. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of this item indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it, it's unanimous. This item is passed with a favorable recommendation back to City Council for our next council meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Your team is welcome to stay on if they choose to. The next item we have is a presentation by Chief Rodney Barkle from our Hartford Fire Department.
Good evening.
Good evening.
How are you doing, Councilman?
Doing well, thank you. How about yourself, Chief?
I'm excellent, seeing as how my Rams took the Super Bowl. Yes, there is a Rams fan in Hartford.
I see. You're the second person that I know that's a Rams fan. So
Only two?
congrats. Yeah.
I was rocking my Jack Youngblood jersey yesterday.
Oh boy, you go way back.
That's right. when they started in LA. So
Yeah.
I was definitely excited. Definitely excited.
You have the
So,
floor, Chief.
I am going to share my screen. Can you all see that? Can you see
Yes.
that?
Yes, sir.
All right, cool. So I wanted to start off with this slide. I know I talk about ISO and NFPA a lot, but I wanted to show you this slide just to give you a little bit of explanation of what ISO is. It's a for-profit company. And when we talk about response to suppression, so it's rated off a total time of 6 minutes and 20 seconds, is allotted from the time the alarm is received to the time the first dispatch, the first engine or pumper arrives on scene. So as long as what we try to aim for is staying in that 90th percentile when we're dispatched to calls for service as it pertains to fire and MVAs, anything other than an EMS call. And for EMS calls, we use NFPA 1710, which is a total time of 5 minutes. So they give you 60 seconds for turnout time, and that's the time you're allotted to get on the apparatus, and 240 seconds for travel time. So the EMS runs are calculated using incident types 300 through 510. And you'll see those incidents when we review some of the EMS calls for service for the month of January. So we're able to track the phone pickup time, which is included in the total response time of 6 minutes and 20 seconds. Before the new CAD system, we weren't really able to track that time. So thank you, Ms. Webster, for all your hard work in getting that new CAD system up and running. So general updates for HFD, we currently have no PPE needs as it pertains to pandemic supplies. We've been working with the state to acquire more home testing kits. And as we receive those, we'll give them out to vulnerable populations, Hartford Public Schools, and we've begun giving those out to city employees for a second round. We currently have no members out on COVID-19 or in the protocol as it stands today. And then, like I said, we've begun to disseminate a second round of home test kits and masks to all city employees. Granted, the division heads or department heads sent us in a request form with how many they need. And we're giving this second round 2 kits per employee. We still currently have the recruit class in session. And again, they're scheduled to graduate April 1st. So our current numbers in the recruit class is 23 out of 30. Unfortunately, we had to drop 2 more individuals because they could not pass EMR, and EMR, emergency medical response technician, is contractually required for them to become a firefighter. So that is a 40-hour class, and we're in week, I believe, 7, and there's just no time for them to make up those 40 hours. So our 3 tests for district chief special services, both of those tests have been completed. The candidates are reviewing any of their scores or interviews to see if they have any discrepancies. That stuff goes back to the testing company, and it will either improve their score or leave their score the same. As you know from before, we did a driver's test. We promoted 16 new drivers. Those guys have already been assigned. The great thing about this last driver test is that those individuals not only can drive a pumper engine or district chief car, so it's an all-in-one encompassing test, whereas before we had to do 3 separate tests. So we talked about this last month, recent community partners. We partnered with some organizations to deliver home test kits and N95 masks. And then our latest partnership was we partnered with HPD and ESMT to do a career fair. This was Saturday, February 12th at the Metzner Center, and that's, I believe, the address 680 Franklin Avenue. Got a few applicants. This is our second go around doing a career fair. You know, HPD is constantly recruiting. We're always looking for folks, and we're certainly trying to get more bodies into ESMT as well. So our fire stat data for the month of January, as you can see, we had 12 calls for service, a little below or a lot below the 90th percentile. We're usually ranging in about 86% under that 620 mark. So there's been 1 or 2 fires that would bring the percentages down in terms of company maybe being out of district. Well, we might have had an assignment that's, let's say, the assignment that would usually respond to 250 High Street. was already out on a call. So we might get another assignment closer from the south end coming up north, and that would skew the times. So here you can see our EMS data on the left where it says incident types. You can see 321, which is an EMS call excluding vehicle accidents with injuries, 311 medical assist, rescue or EMS standby, motor vehicle accident. So these are all our 300 codes. And if you look at the NRZ map, you can see that Northeast, Asylum Hill, and Berry Square received the most calls for service in the month of January. Rescue calls for January, you can see Asylum Hill and South End received 3, Sheldon, Charter Oak, and Northeast, along with the rest of the NRZs, received 1 rescue call for the month of January. So these are all fires in the month of January. We had 12 building fires, West End, Asylum Hill, and Frog Hollow, along with Berry Square received the most fires in the month of January. And we did not have any serious fires, nothing we couldn't handle. A lot of them, if it's a kitchen fire, food on the stove that extended into the cabinets, will be captured in this data as a structure fire. So this last slide, you'll see the blue number with the blue diamond with a number under it that indicates that particular neighborhood closest to the fire station. So like 16s had 1 fire in the month of January. Engine 2 had 1 fire, engine 14 had 1. So engine 11 looks like they had 2, engine 5 had 10. So these are fires that occurred in relation to where the fire station is located. This is our demographics for the department. As you can see, it has not changed much. It does not include the cadets that are currently in the training academy as right now. 31% Black, 34% white, and 35% Hispanic. So Narcan for the month of January, we administered 41 doses, but right now we're trying to manage our RMS to extract that data onto our fire stat. And hopefully we'll have those numbers as it pertains to each neighborhood for you next month. And that is it. Are there any questions for me?
Yeah, Chair, I have a question.
Right ahead, Councilman.
Thank you, Chief. Just Sisson Avenue. It seems that was closed for a time. What's the status over there?
Yes, sir. So Sisson Avenue is undergoing a renovation right now. That's one of our bigger projects. What we're trying to do is follow our capital improvement plan and move from station to station. As you very well know, when Chief Freeman was here, the average age of our firehouses is over 76 years old. So Engine 11 being our biggest station right now is undergoing renovation. New windows, we're redoing the floors, we're making the kitchen bigger since it's housing 3 companies. This is actually going to be the first fire station where you have male and female locker rooms. So we're trying to do everything right for this fire station, and hopefully when we get to the next one, we'll do the same thing.
Where's the equipment currently housed, and has this had an effect on your response times?
So Engine 11 is currently housed at Engine 8 on Park Street, and Ladder 5 is housed at Engine 14 on 25 Blue Hills Avenue. The Heavy Rescue TAC 1 is housed at Clark Street, Engine 7, and they pretty much have the run of the entire city. But In terms of ISO rating, it only counts the first arriving engine company. So the first arriving unit that puts water on the fire. And so those two locations are for engine 11, being at engine 8, it's, if we were going by districts, it would be their second district.
And what do we expect for return to the equipment on Sisson Avenue?
So we're looking at January, February, March, May to June. We're looking for a tentative return date. So it would have been sooner, but as you know, Councilman, due to the pandemic, we've received, a delay in supplies and delivery dates. So that was one of the things that slowed down the progress of the renovation. Is like we was waiting for windows and then we was waiting for lockers. So yeah, it's been slow going, but I think we'll definitely be open before the summer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Any questions from my colleagues? Chief, how's the recruit class going?
They're doing well, sir. Right now, they're doing what we call rescue core, and that's the basis for all of our technical rescue classes like trench, high angle rescue, rope rescue, confined space. All of our recruits will undergo what we call core rescue training, and that's what they're doing these next 2 weeks. So they'll be learning the basics of ropes and knots and pulleys and things of that nature. But other than that, they're getting there. It's a long 16 weeks, but they're getting there. I don't think I'll lose any more, hopefully.
How many have we lost already?
At 23 out of 30 right now.
Okay. Yeah, let's keep our fingers crossed with that.
Definitely.
How is the fire inspections going? Are we still, I don't want to say behind, but are we where we need to be regarding the inspections for properties?
That would be a negative, sir. We're still grinding away at our 2s and our 2 and 3 family houses. Like I said, the marshals are working on the RLs, their days off, to get those inspections done. We have currently put out the posting for more inspectors, which should be closing on Tuesday, hopefully, and that testing process will be done, should be completed by the end of March. And then once we get a certified list, we have 4 spots in the next available class in April. So we'll be getting at least 4 more people trained up and in that office. Right now we have 4 people detailed to assist the marshals in whatever it is they need, whether it be completing the paperwork or filing in the office, just whatever they can do so that marshal doesn't have to do it and can continue with inspections.
Does the fire marshal's office team, are they still having those issues with folks returning back from workers' comp?
So currently we only have 2 members out on workers' comp. The other members received ADA letters, which pretty much said they couldn't do the job anymore. So we're trying to fill their spots, but we just have one guy, he had surgery, and we only have 1 other person out. But everyone else is working currently.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from my colleagues? None? Thank you, Chief. Appreciate your presentation. Okay, next on our agenda, we have a presentation by Chief Jason Thordy from the Hartford Police Department. Chief,
You're on mute.
The chief's just trying to unmute himself. He'll be right with us.
Can you hear me now?
Sounds good.
All right. I share. Is my screen still shared? I think I prematurely shared my screen here.
Yes, it's still shared.
All right. So you can see Public Safety Committee.
Yes, sir.
All right. That's a good start. Sorry about that. I shared my screen and couldn't find how to unmute myself. All right, on our agenda today, we'll do a general crime update, CompStat numbers, early in the year yet, but still some numbers that we can go over. I'll have Sergeant Boisvert, since he's on the call with us, talk about our recent homicides. One of the areas that is up, we are down in a lot of areas, but one of the areas we are up is burglaries. We had a significant downtown burglary arrest, and he'll talk about a couple of the other burglary related issues that we're dealing with. And then the smart policing initiative we already went over, so we can skip that. So our current crime activity, basically that got us through the first month of the year. First section in green is our week change from this last week in 2022 versus the same week in 2021. This early in the year, that is not really much of an indicator of anything, but the 28-day period, we do have better information. So in homicide in the last 28 days, so that's comparing the last 28 days of this year to the same 28-day period last year, down from 3 homicides to 1. Now this is CompStat data that was available to us as of Monday when we did this presentation. As most on the call know, we have had an additional 2 homicides. So we are even at this point, up from 0 sexual assaults up to 1, down 2 robberies from 16 to 14, down in aggravated assault by 55%. That's a good number. Burglary, as I said, we'll talk about that, but we've seen an increase in burglaries as we've started the new year. We've got details out there that are addressing that, and we're seeing some return on investment with some significant arrests, one of which Aaron will talk about. Larceny down almost 25%, a significant number. Auto theft, as we know, we have been challenged with the auto theft problem over the last year and a half. We are down from 46 to 33, so down 28% auto theft. The Greater Hartford Regional Auto Theft Task Force that we created about 2/3 or so of the way through the year last year to bring in resources from our surrounding towns, since most of our vehicles, a large percentage of our vehicles, are stolen out of town and recovered here in Hartford. We had a commitment through the end of December from these police departments. 12 have re-upped to continue this task force on auto theft. So we are continuing this past, even though the funding from OPM dried up, we are continuing this task force now. We have locked everybody in for a year. If the problem diminishes and we don't need the task force, we can end it early. But we have our neighbors to the west, West Hartford, East Hartford, Bloomfield. We've got Bristol, we've got Southington, we've got a whole bunch of PDs that have signed on to give us resources in auto theft, and we're seeing the fruits of that labor. So overall, 28 days, we're down almost 22%. Shooting incidents continue to decline, down 20% for the 28-day period. And then this year-to-date, again, year-to-date numbers are, we're only a month in, but most of which are trending in the right direction, with the exception of burglary that we will talk about in a minute. I'll have Lieutenant Boisvert go over the 3 homicides so far this year. 152 Mather Street is actually the one that's indicated on the CompStat report, and then the other 2, Bellevue Street and Greenfield. Evergreen will be will be the two most recent. So Lieutenant Boisvert, take it away.
Thank you, sir. All three homicides at this point do have forward movement. Our first one was 152 Mather Street. We have somebody we believe is involved, identified. We have physical evidence linking him to one of the vehicles that was used. We have a flyer out and attempting to locate him. Our second one at 294 Bellevue. That was the one of the vehicle that took off and crashed into the fence. We believe at this point that that was a narcotic related homicide. When the detectives were able to retrieve the video from a nearby building, they saw an individual running from that vehicle, not inside, but outside of the vehicle, right after the shots were fired. Interestingly enough, they did some case incidents in the area, and they located a male. It looks just like a male that was involved in a shots fired incident back in December. So we have casings from the shots fired incident. We have casings from the homicide. So it's going to be some lab work, but there is some movement on that one. And number three was 16 Evergreen, the two females that were sleeping in bed when they were shot. A lot of good stuff coming out of that one. We actually have very good video. We actually have one of the suspects positively ID'd. We don't have probable cause for an arrest yet, but we are very confident that that will be concluded relatively soon. As far as the burglaries go, the chief talked about, we did have quite an uptick. Usually when you see an uptick in burglaries, it's usually one or two people that are committing the majority of those. We had a downtown burglar who was arrested by patrol after a warrant for the burglary of a residential building on Asylum Avenue. I think it was 620 Asylum Avenue. He's been arrested, and he was a suspect in the juiced up burglary on Asylum Street and also Vaughn's. Since his arrest, there's been no more burglaries downtown. Also in the south end, patrol grabbed a guy, I think it was last night, in the Jubilee House on Clifford Street. Active burglary. They took him into custody. He's our suspect in two residential burglaries on Fairfield Avenue and one on Zion Street. And the Peters Unisex Barbershop, I know that got a lot of attention. We have a suspect we believe is responsible for that one, as well as the Hartford Fire Credit Union that was hit earlier. Interestingly enough, that came from the tip line. Somebody called and dimed out their buddy. So that's my friend in the video. Sure enough, it looks just like him. So there's been flyers attached to the department emails for questioning for that individual. But so you had three distinct patterns, three distinct people identified, and we have some arrests coming out of that. Any questions for me?
So you can continue.
That's all I have for the homicides and for the burglary updates.
So that's all we got, unless there's any questions.
Thank you for the presentation. Just far as trends from, we're almost a month and a half in to this calendar year. Nationally, how are we looking regarding, homicides in the city our size?
I'm not superstitious, but in the interest of just in case there's such a thing as being superstitious, I will optimistically say we're holding our own. I mean, when you look at the violence in the major cities across the country and even in the state, we had a tough year last year for homicides that's kind of on par with what other communities were seeing. The strange thing about that is that we saw a decrease in both aggravated assault and in non-fatal shootings. So that's strange. Like normally you'd see a correlation. Your aggravated assaults are basically any kind of assault with, a weapon. So when you see the homicides that are not shooting related, that involve knives or blunt instruments or anything else, usually a trend upward is also indicative of a trend upward in aggravated assaults. We've been down significantly in aggravated assaults, both last year and the beginning of this year. Our non-fatal shootings were down significantly, but yet our homicides were up quite a bit. So I don't have a good real explanation for that. Most other places are seeing, if you watch the news for any period of time, you'll see that, New York City and other places are up in double digits in robbery, rape, aggravated assault. As you can see, the numbers for this year are kind of, I'm going to dare to try to do this again. But the numbers that we kind of, with the exception of burglary, the numbers that we're seeing this year are pretty consistent with what we saw last year. Significant decreases in aggravated assault, significant, decreases in our shooting incidents. Like I said, this year, I don't know what the next week's CompStat period looks like as far as homicides in 2021. But if they hold in 2021, then we'll be even. We'll be at 3 this year compared to 3 last year, a couple weeks into February, month and a half into the year. That's not, that's not great, but it's not indicative of the significant increase in that we've seen in the last 2 years. So, it's a little early to tell. I do think that shooting team is going to have, a significant impact. I do think having parole and probation back at the table, having court back in session is going to assist us in our piece of this. We did launch Project Longevity 2.0 with our new project coordinator. I think that's going to have an impact. Again, when you see on February 26th, I don't want to spoil it, but when you see the amount of detail that we have and how much information that we have that's going to drive our efforts, that's real data. For once, since I've been here 26 years, I don't think we've ever done that comprehensive of an analysis of what's actually driving our crime, what the perpetrators are doing, what their histories look like, what they're involved in, so that we can truly, from a law enforcement piece, interrupt it. There's a lot of other pieces to the puzzle that need to be in place to interrupt violence. We've been working closely with peace builders and others, and I think those efforts have to continue. But I think when it comes to national trends, looks as though we're continuing to trend in the right direction. Homicides are something that we've got to keep our eye on for sure. Burglaries, we know that if we have 1 or 2 serial burglars, those numbers can jump, even double, especially early in the year, quickly. One burglar can be responsible for, 5, 6, 8, 10, even or more burglaries in a week in one CompStat period. We had 3 different patterns going on. But the officers, that last one, that downtown burglary pattern that we talked about, patrol did a great job at interrupting that. That wasn't detective work. That was good police work by the patrol division. So, we'll keep our eyes on it. But the burglary trend is a better problem to have. It's something that we know how to get out there, and we know how to slow down, and we know how to stop.
Thanks. One more question, and I'll get to you, Councilman Mitchell. I've received some complaints regarding the non-response time, the presence of not responding to calls that residents are making to the Hartford Police Department. Can you just speak to that, if that has reached your desk, if you've heard about this, and also too, just for the sake of the public, can walk the public through the process of if a person is looking to get to the Hartford Police Department for them to respond to whatever call that they're making, how that actually works?
Sure. So we talked about this. I have not received specific issues when it came to officers not responding. Response times here have always been, an issue that we've been working on. I implemented, when I first came in as interim chief, implemented some quick programs that I thought would help based on my experience over the years, like dedicated traffic crash officers that go out there and investigate these crashes. They take a lot of time. They're filling out the paperwork is brutal. It takes a long time. Unfortunately, with our staffing levels the way they are, I had to put those officers back in patrol. Having officers that, picking out some of these calls that take longer to investigate, longer to complete the paperwork, and having officers out there that are dedicated to doing that kind of work is a way to reduce call times. But with the numbers that we have now, until we can bolster those numbers, we just can't afford to do that. We need those officers and those bodies in patrol. There are folks that call the police for a lot of things. We've really dove into this in the last 2 years about what we want cops out there for. Some people are calling law enforcement for civil matters. We rely on the teleserve officers, the front desk officers, and the dispatchers to inform residents when it's not a police matter, instead of sending one out there. Because when you send a police officer out there for an issue that doesn't require a police officer, and then it escalates into a problem, that's exactly what we're trying not to do. So vetting those calls is important. As you know, we launched the HEART team last week. Was the kind of first week of the juvenile piece of the HEART team, so that we can better respond to mental illness with people other than cops. We did the filming of kind of a little mini commercial for that this week that should be coming out soon. But our real focus is on making sure that things that require police are what we're going to, and things that don't require police are things we're not going to. I don't know specifics about the people that are talking to you about, what officers are going to or what they're not. Director Webster is on the call. I mean, really the way it works is when you call the police department, you go through ES&T. That's what, what dispatch does. They take the call in, they evaluate, what the call needs. They make it an A call, a B call, or a C call, and then they dispatch an officer. And when they dispatch an officer has a certain amount of time to get there. A lot of the wait times that people experience are usually C calls. They're usually minor calls that are inactive. People, unfortunately, there are times, if we're busy, where people can wait a significant period of time to see a cop. That is, like I said, that is not something that we're the only ones that struggle with, but we have to divert our resources to active calls, people that are actively at risk. And that's why they rate them as kind of A, B, and C calls and prioritize them, if you will, for a response. So without specifics, I don't know how much more you want me to go into. I'll defer to Sue if she has anything to add.
No, I 100% agree with you, Chief. So Councilman, if you could get us some specifics on that, we can look into each individual situation and see exactly what happened. It's much easier to do it that way than to just kind of speculate as to what happened, but we're happy to do that if we can get some additional information.
Thank you. No, I was involved, just to be clear, not involved. I attended a community meeting where this was brought up. And so what I would do, I'll go back to that group to see if they can provide with some specifics regarding that, so that I can communicate that over to you all, just for clarification.
Perfect.
I mean, even if it's a general subject matter, like I said, a lot of times people call us for evictions or landlord tenant disputes or things that are traditionally civil in nature. They could very well be referred to a civil agency for something like that, and there was no intended response. Then some people, they just wait a period of time, and by the time the officer gets there, they've left or they're asleep or something, and the officer knocks, and that's a second kind of category of things where people, I've had to answer questions about people saying that officers don't respond. Sometimes it's that they did respond. Granted, it was an hour later, and we can go back. Sue can go back and look at the call volume and see if there's a legit explanation for that, or if a ball was dropped. We found both as we've looked back into some of these things where a call should have been handled quicker and wasn't, and we've also found where the place was just busy. You get a fire, as Chief Barkle alluded to. If you get a fire, we have officers that have to shut 4, 5, 6 streets down to keep the public safe and away and keep the fire secure. That's we run 21 cars. If you take 5 or 6 of them and tie them up at a fire scene, the response time is going to go down. We still are able to get to the A calls, priority A calls, and the B calls, but a C call, like a fender bender where no one's injured, that could wait.
Thank you. All right, Councilman Mitchell.
Thank you. So, Chief, I'm really passing along sort of a question that I got from a constituent who I guess follows, frankly, these things more closely than I do. But apparently there's been a pretty steady number of panhandling arrests downtown through these first couple months of the year. And I was trying to figure out if it's more than in the past, but I frankly couldn't find the data disaggregated. But is it more than in the past? And if so, I mean, panhandling seems like a thing that should rarely lead to an arrest. So I guess I wonder if you could just like spin out, why are we seeing panhandling arrests?
So, I mean, panhandling is a violation. We get a lot of complaints from downtown businesses. We get a lot of complaints from people that drive in and out of the city that, are frankly, in fear as these folks are standing on the side of the road. It's really, the opinions go both ways as to what you should or shouldn't do about it. It is a very popular topic at community meetings about folks not wanting us to be a hub for panhandling. As far as numbers go, that's not something that's CompStat reported. It's not a Part 1 crime, but we can certainly look at numbers and get you some numbers, email you some numbers.
Yeah, just like a year-to-date comparison. But I have a question. So when we talk about panhandling arrests, we're talking about mostly the folks who post up at an intersection with a sign?
Yes, that's predominantly the panhandling enforcement that we do. There's a myriad of ways of looking at that, when it comes to traffic, when it comes to safety, as these folks are stepping out into some of these areas. There's also the fact that they're actually panhandling, which is breaking the law. But what I would think that this person's alluding to is that it was difficult to make arrests for panhandling. Panhandling is a community court offense. When community court was closed for the better part of 16 months, we really weren't doing a lot of panhandling enforcement because it was going nowhere. There was nowhere to send them. You were basically writing a court date that could be 6-8 months. And then that court date gets changed. A lot of the folks that are panhandling, frankly, they don't have an address for us to send them like a notification. Hey, don't go to court. So it really became a fruitless effort. And we recognized that, even though people were constantly on my case about, trying to do something about the panhandling. There wasn't a lot we could do at that point. We sent Jimmy Barrett out there. We sent, services out there, Capital Region Mental Health. A lot of times, panhandling is associated with addiction. So we tried to get people on board to help with that. We'll still do that. But some of these folks, it's very lucrative. And they frankly say, you can either arrest me or you cannot. They literally give us that as an ultimatum. Remember, we did the Hartford's Alternative to Arrest program. When I first came in as interim chief, we tried that. And a lot of the folks that were involved in panhandling said, I'm not interested in being deferred. I'm not interested in a program. I'm interested in standing out here and make as much money as I can. And so give me my summons and let me go on my way. So it's a complex issue, but I think what you probably saw is an increase probably in the last year because community court is open. We've spoken to Judge Wu, and
you're just giving these people a ticket, right? They're not getting hauled in.
Yep, summons.
Right.
They're getting a summons to go to community court, and they end up cleaning up streets and doing the things that community court is designed to do. What I will say is that some of them decide to not go to court. So when they build up 4 or 5 or 6 tickets where they don't show up, the community court judge will hit them with a failure to appear. If we grab them with a failure to appear, that's the only time that those really become in custody arrests. But yes, other than that, it's a summons.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other questions? Councilman Gale.
Yeah, quick one, Chief, just a follow up. I don't know if there's any new information. This shootout that occurred on Girard Avenue, I've forgotten now exactly. I think it must have been maybe even early summer. But you recall the incident I'm speaking about?
Yep.
Has there been any new developments in that, to your knowledge?
No, I mean, we made an arrest. I think I was able to report that back, within a week or two of that incident. Aaron, if you have more, please feel free to unmute and jump in on that. But that was a juvenile that we knew was responsible for a whole bunch of these carjacking / auto thefts. The auto theft task force was involved in that. I spoke as promised in that meeting that we had. I spoke with the Connecticut Chiefs of Police Association about some kind of model policy. I spoke with, I know that Representative Ritter also spoke with Connecticut Chiefs of Police. So, I think they were looking at some kind of training versus a model policy on what to do with these cars. That was again, that I know that thing turned into quite a spectacle, but that was a lot of stars that had to line up for that incident to go down the way that it did, and it is certainly not common practice. But we made an arrest in that case. It was a juvenile. It was not his first arrest. I don't even think it was his last arrest. He was quite involved.
I think though that one of the concerns I heard was, I mean, I recall all of that, and I apologize. But I think one of the concerns that I had heard and had more to do with the owner of the car and was this appropriate for the owner of the car to be shooting back, and where did he get the gun from? And there was just, like, as I recall, a lot of kind of unanswered questions from the community as to how in the world all of a sudden this guy shows up at the site with a gun and is firing back at these kids.
No, he got the gun from the guy that shot at him. We explained this during the during the meetings that we had. This owner was there because it was an exotic car, and the concern was that a tow would hurt it because of the all-wheel drive platform on a Maserati. And the officers from Windsor, to their defense, were trying to be understanding, and they allowed the owner to stand by to get a specialty tow vehicle out there to recover this car. They were the victims. The car was recovered. I think some of the implications were, hey, too bad, just because it's an expensive car, you should tow it any old way. That's not the way I want my officers to respond. If they can help somebody out with an expensive car, or quite frankly, or a not expensive car, I want them to try to be helpful. And these Windsor officers were trying to be helpful. What they didn't know is that these kids would return to that car. In hindsight being 2020, Windsor probably should have left an officer out there with them, at least until the tow got there. They didn't do that. These kids came back. 2 kids came back. One kid, when approached by the owner saw the lights turn on in the car, knowing that these kids had keys. That's the only way those lights would turn on. When they unlocked the door, the lights came on. The owner approached and said, "Hey, what are you doing with my car keys?" One of the kids went to retrieve a gun from his waistband. The gun slipped out of the kid's hand and fell on the ground. The owner dove on the gun. That's how the owner got the gun, from the bad guy. The second kid pulled the gun out, didn't drop it, and fired at the owner of the car. The owner used the gun retrieved from the other bad guy to return fire. The kid, the kid that we got in custody basically admitted that that's how that whole thing went down, that they were going back to retrieve the car to use it in another crime. Not knowing that the officers had already been there, done a canvass, they did all their investigative work. These kids had no idea that occurred. The officers left, and that was what the resulting, that's what the result was. Luckily, nobody was hit.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Councilman Gale. Any questions from my other colleagues? I just have one other question. Could you just provide us with an update on the climate study and the steps that the police department is doing to implement that? I know AC Howell has been tasked with overseeing that, but can you just give us a brief overview regarding that?
Yeah, I can provide it for you. I mean, the climate study gives us a significant number of things here to work on. We did a 1-year look into it and reported back to council and others on where we were at the 1-year mark. Every time that we kind of stop to create a report, we're stopping to create a report. So, I basically said we would do a 1-year and a 2-year. Our 2-year will be this coming August. We're not really close to that yet. I can have, Howell kind of do a quick rundown of the spreadsheet, provide you with a spreadsheet, but I don't have, again, we knew when we did the cultural analysis that this analysis would take time. We're way ahead of schedule at the 1-year mark as far as how many things were implemented. Many of those things that were suggested are contractual issues. Our contract is up for the police department. Our contract is up this June 30th, 2022. So hopefully those issues that are contract related in the cultural analysis will be addressed in the new contract that'll go into place, hopefully without arbitration or anything crazy, on July 1 of 2022 this year. So that's an opportunity to check off a whole bunch of those things that were contract related. So we can, provide you with, kind of a brief summary of where we are, which is probably going to be, basically each one of the requirements and, a checklist that's going to say either completed, partially completed, contract required. There's a whole bunch of, kind of things next to them that explain where we are in that process. But, I can't give a comprehensive analysis, every month or two, because it's an ongoing effort to address those, all those things that were identified. But I'll give you what we got.
No, thank you. That'll be good. Whatever you have, please, send that over, and we look forward to the 2-year mark in August with that full report on that.
At the 2-year mark, we've talked about, potentially doing another, seeing where we are, and then doing at least another partial analysis, if not another full analysis, to gauge where the department is. Many of the concerns that were expressed by members of the department, like pay, benefits, things like that, many of them have been addressed. Policy changes we've done. There's a lot of things in there. Like one of the issues in the cultural analysis was they wanted the ability to respond better to people with mental illness. The launch of the HEART team is going to be a big piece of that. Having clinicians that are available to them at their disposal to help them deal with these calls. So, a lot of those things are underway, but I imagine in a year from August, or in a year from now in August, almost a year from now, there will be other concerns. And I think it's important for us to continue to hear those concerns so we can continue to get better. So we'll see what happens in August, but we might just do another one, or at least some kind of a survey or polling to see kind of what other concerns are popping up.
There's been some kind, I don't want to belabor the time. There's been some conversation regarding the police code of conduct. Can you just provide an explanation? Is the police code of conduct it's a policy matter, but is it voted on by the Hartford Police Union and incorporated into the contract?
No.
It's administrative.
Yeah, so we've talked about updating the code of conduct. We have, I think it's important to do that. Where you get into, I'm not a lawyer, I'm certainly not a labor attorney, but when the code of conduct does directly impact discipline, and what discipline is, officers will face. So there becomes a union issue there. We've talked to corporation counsel. I know Natalie's on the call, she might be able to interject, but even though the code of conduct is not in the union contract, it does have impacts on the bargaining unit members. So we have a committee that actually, planning and accreditation, Laura is one of the ones tasked with that, to go through the code of conduct. The real delay in that was, this is one of those things that we were looking for the PARB to actually have some input in. So it certainly has been a little while here to harness that PARB to focus on one policy like the code of conduct. But that was one of the things that we were looking for, some kind of outside, people sitting at the table when it comes to that code of conduct. It is outdated. It's I believe 1993 is when the code of conduct was the last updated.
Okay, thank you. Those are a little music to my ears because I know PARP is supposed to be getting back up and running after some miscommunication items and things like that. So definitely look forward to them participating with the discussion on this. Any other questions before we move over to Director Webster? Seeing none. All right, Director Webster, welcome. And
thank you. Thank you. Good evening, Councilman Clark, council members. Thank you for inviting me here this evening. I was asked to provide an update on the current projects that we have ongoing in the Department of Emergency Services and Telecommunications. So one of the projects that we have ongoing that is coming to a close is the computer aided dispatch and RMS records management project. So we cut over to the new CAD system on May 11th of 2011. We cut over to the new RMS system a week later on May 18th, 2011. That project is dwindling down as we're getting all open items cleared out. It's actually gone very well. Central Square was our chosen vendor, and they were chosen through the RFP process with several committee members. We had a few hiccups along the line where we were working through some things, but all in all, the project has gone well, and we should be coming to a close by the end of this fiscal year with that particular project. The second large project that we were working on was the purchase and deployment of the law enforcement mobile and portable radios. All of the portable radios have been deployed out to law enforcement. The mobile radios are going to be deployed a little slower because as we get new vehicles into the fleet, that's when we're installing those new mobile radios. So those are going slower than the portables. But we're getting those deployed out into the field as well. And the final project that we're working on is an RFP is currently in place for the radio infrastructure, for the whole citywide radio infrastructure. And that's going to be a large, probably 3-year project, replacing all the main tower sites in the city's overall radio infrastructure. So those are our 3 main projects that we're working on right now in the department from a technology perspective. And I'm happy to answer any more specific questions that you have about that.
Now, thank you for that update. Now, with the infrastructure projects that you're working on regarding the CAD system and the other technology, now will that actually now make sure that the police department will be able to radio the fire department, and all the radios will be able to talk to each other? Because I believe that's what's been an issue with everyone's radios is not on the system. So there's a huge, I don't say huge, but there's a disconnect.
There is. So the fire department through the fire assistance grant purchased Motorola radios. Those radios did not work with our existing radio infrastructure. So in order to make those radios work, we put them onto the state core at the request of Chief Freeman. So we could have the fire department's radios working as well as transmitting into the communication center. So that was done. And those are a digital radio system. So once we upgrade our main radio infrastructure to the state-of-the-art system that we need to have, we will be able to have interoperability between police, fire, and any other agencies, depending on who we request to transmit to.
And what's the timeline on that for the completion of this project?
That's a good 2.5 to 3 year project. It's a very large project. We have one main site today, which is at the Hartford Insurance Group. We have to add 2 additional sites at 2 other locations. So it's a large project. We're still in the RFP phase. If we can get it moving quickly, we can certainly do that. But that's pretty much the timeline and how we've built it out in the CIP budget.
I remember us passing that resolution for the Hartford Tower for us to update the infrastructure. When is the closing for the RFP for the other 2 locations?
Well, the first RFP closed. We had several vendors come in. We weren't pleased with the responses that we received. So we're going back in and we are redoing some of the pieces of the RFP. This one should go out much quicker. So we anticipate it's going to go back out in probably another 3 weeks with a quicker turnaround. And that will be to replace all 3 sites.
Is the expected turnaround 14 days or 30 days? Do you know what the RP turnaround time is?
The last time I think we put it out for 2 months, but we don't anticipate to put it out that long, probably 3 to 4 weeks. But that's a procurement question, but that's what I anticipate it to be since we're not making that many changes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Please keep us updated on the progress of all of that.
Yes.
Any questions from my council colleagues? No, seeing none. All right. Thank you very much, Director Webster, for your update. Since we have no other items on our agenda to discuss, this Public Quality Life and Public Safety Committee meeting for today is now adjourned. Thank you very much. And we'll see you next time. Have a good night. Take care.
Thank
Good
you.
night.